So here today with Joe Greer and his, the M6 that started it all. You can tell by the wearing on that if you've seen this online. And you see what's around his neck. The M6, the new one that Leica made that he's gonna give me.
You're dreaming, pal.
Why not? We shot the new Leica M6 release commercial with Joe Greer back in October, and we want to just like break down how we shot it, go through the edit, and I haven't shown it on my channel. It just released on Joe's and Leica's YouTube channel. We shot a commercial for Leica.
Wild sentence.
So if it wasn't abundantly clear at this point, I've already shared on my channel a ton of times. We've been shooting a documentary with Joe Greer all year long, started back in March, and it's about his marathon attempt this past December at California International Marathon. And in this process, we were given the opportunity to shoot this commercial. I went to Franklin in August with a couple people from the team. Steven didn't make that one. But then I FaceTimed him with exciting news. What was that news?
He said, hey, this is a verbal NDA. I said, okay. Joe's been approached by Leica because they're re-releasing the M6. Do you want to shoot the commercial for it?
And I obviously was like, well, yeah, of course we're already shooting it. So this is just me telling you we're going to shoot the commercial.
Yeah, this is a binding agreement. That's really lo-fi FaceTime call.
What's funny is like that was mid-August that I was in Franklin, and then we just turned around 2 weeks later, me, Steven, and Gene. We got a Holiday Inn, and then Gene with his travel experience at Platinum, Preferred, Reserve, Elite, Diamond, got us an upgrade to the Virgin Hotel.
Double amethyst, triple emerald. He's really good.
We had a sick hotel room in Nashville thanks to Gene, and that's where we ended up shooting a lot of this commercial for that trip.
Yeah.
Some of your images were super sick, like with the curtain. The curtain was great diffusion.
Yeah.
We had this red table that really matched the Leica brand. And yeah, it just fit perfectly. So we used that hotel room to get imagery, but even more importantly, we got a voiceover from him to put over this short, and we interviewed him as well. We didn't end up using the visual on that interview, but we used the audio from it. Because we were at a very unfair advantage for visuals already because
we'd been shooting a documentary for 6 months prior to that. Yeah.
Thankfully, we had footage of Joe already using his existing M6. A lot of this documentary is about his life and his work outside of running as well. So we went on multiple trips to New York, and we shot him in Nashville. And then this was sandwiched in between another trip we were taking for the doc.
Yes, yeah. The timing of it all worked out actually pretty perfectly. We were sitting on a lot of beautiful footage as is, made a special trip out to Nashville to film in Nashville and Franklin for Leica. And then 4 days after we returned from that trip, we set back out to St. Augustine, Florida for a trip that we had already planned with Joe to visit where he grew up. And we got some more pickup shots there. A lot of really beautiful footage on the beach, especially him using the new M6 to kind of counter the footage we had of him using the old M6.
And I got my camera in the ocean a little bit.
Did you get it wet?
Maybe a little bit.
He says it'll be fine as he's slowly dying inside.
Do it for the shot. Oops. Joe was very careful with the new M6. I was not so careful with my C70, which sucked because the rest of that trip, like half of the buttons weren't working on the C70, but we still rolled with it, and it ended up being fine.
The amount of salt that I blew out of the camera was alarming.
Yeah. All that stuff was shot. We were sitting on a mountain of footage, and we're like, what the heck do we do with this? We have a 3-minute cut we need to do. So Steven started cutting all the audio, condensing over an hour of Joe talking down to 3 minutes, which getting the most important stuff.
Man, culling is tricky in that regard. Like, how do you make the best 3-minute story out of like well over 60 minutes of stuff?
And Joe self-admittedly talks a lot. He'll go off on, artistry and all sorts of stuff that isn't necessarily relevant for the concise thing we need here. So we're pulling just bits and pieces. So some from his initial interview in the documentary all the way back in March, and then a couple of clips, from the hotel and the 2 different settings. So you started cutting that all together just with like a random song. And then I kind of tasked myself with like, okay, where do we get the sauce now? Like, how do we get this thing like exciting. Just kind of reflecting on the nature of who Joe is, loves everything retro, everything vintage. And so recently I'd heard that Makeup and Vanity Set, an artist on Music Bed, was featured on Stranger Things. And so I looked through their catalog and I found like the most perfect.
Legitimately perfect intro song ever.
Yeah.
And it played really well into the creative direction of the film, which was to juxtapose Joe's life in New York City as a street photographer, which is a little more in the past for him now versus where he currently lives in Franklin with his wife Maddie, and the life that they are currently living, which is a lot slower, a lot more methodical. It's a different pace of life. We wanted to have those two things kind of not in opposition, but almost like show the arc of some of Joe's career and the way his life looks currently.
So we shot this whole thing on the C70, but also before I had the C70 with the C200 and pickup shots with the R5. So we're just gonna play the commercial now before I play it in its entirety at the end of the video. And we're just gonna kind of talk through some of the things we did and how we did them, so you can just see them play.
Hey, my name is Joe Greer.
First shot, how'd you do it?
First shot, yeah, honestly, this is pretty fun. Hey, Instagram Reels, not always bad. I shot this beginning film strip fast moving little thing actually on this carrier right here. This is the Negative Supply 35 mil film carrier.
We use this to scan our film.
We do, shout out Negative Supply. We use that all the time, but for the sake of the shot, I was just pulling an entire roll of 35 mil film through it while my camera was mounted on the riser that we used to scan, but it was recording instead, so I just took that video and we did really film it for a reel originally, and then we were like, hey, what if we used it as the intro sequence for this? Because it ended up looking so much more beautiful than we expected. So I think it really complemented the beginning of the film, especially with the energy and the little sound design in the background of the spinning
and lesson learned here, if you're a filmmaker and you're shooting random things in your life or trips or whatever, like keep all of your footage, and you never know what kind of stock footage you might need out of your own portfolio. So just sit on that stuff and don't just throw it away. Jesse Driftwood.
I am a film photographer based in Franklin, Tennessee. I'm 33 years old, and I've been...
We shot this scene in St. Augustine in our Airbnb, and we actually had a constant light through the window, blasting light through the shades to get that look on the wall. Consistent throughout. It wasn't even a sunny day.
On my Leica M6 for about 5 years now. It really took off when I moved to
All
New
of
York
that
City.
was New York footage.
With me every day on the streets.
New York footage as we were there with him in May. His work in New York, his street photography work.
This was all during a dock trip.
Yeah, he took us to this spot because he was like, this is where I got that lightning bolt shot. And I made sure to get B-roll while we were there of that exact location. And it ended up matching perfectly with his image of the lightning bolt there.
Also, come on, I'm a huge Marvel junkie.
Yeah.
You see the Marvel and Loki in there with the lightning bolt? Like, come on, that's so cool.
It's one of my favorite frames he's ever gotten.
Yeah.
It was one of the most inspiring things. It helped sharpen my eye and train me to be
Sound design.
Sound design there, yeah.
I see the world a little differently now.
Yeah. So this is kind of where almost the introduction of the film concludes. It was very high energy, high octane for the first, roughly 35 seconds of the film. And then this little transition where Joe's saying, I see the world a little differently now. That's flipping into where he and Maddie are currently at.
And used a service called SoundSnap for a lot of the sound design that we put in there.
Yep.
What sounds like a film reel was actually a motorcycle revving.
It was, yep, which was awesome.
Which was cool. I added in the lightning bolt, the thunder sound during that sequence, which really gave a good bit of texture to that image and that scenario, given that my footage was just on a cloudy day and not a rainy day.
A lot of textures, a lot of layers all playing together to build that.
So the sound of M6 advancing.
I bought my first Leica M6 in January of 2017.
To Franklin and their land, their shot for the
It's been in my
dock.
hands almost every day since. I've been able to take it all over the world with me, and
This was shot intentionally, that trip we were there.
So far with it, and in that time, this camera has truly become a part of me.
Shot in the hotel room.
The mechanical and intuitive
And
nature
then a
of
trip
it,
to the
way
creek.
The shutter sounds and even just advancing the film. That simple action has become one of my...
And you actually recorded him doing that into an NTG.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a really clean, crisp shutter and advancing of the new M6, so we had that to play with and use. We used it repeatedly actually throughout the film, just again as another like little textural addition. But
And this is a shot on the C200 earlier in the year on our first trip on Broadway in Nashville. So this is where we were really just kind of getting to know each other. One of my favorite shots of the Leica, him using it.
My favorite things. If I lined up every camera that I
Back
have,
to the trip in Franklin and then St.
told,
Augustine
Joe, you
at
can
the
only
beach.
choose one of these cameras to shoot for the rest
That
of your
blue
life.
hour.
Without hesitation, I'm grabbing
Hotel
my
room.
M6 every single time, and that will be the camera.
St.
I will use
Augustine
for
the
rest
week
of my life.
later.
I think it is the most iconic 35mm film camera.
That night I was super sick. You just took the camera
Yeah.
and went on the beach.
Yeah, it was-
that chaotic movement.
yeah, it was a really fun night.
All handheld.
Yeah.
And we pretty much did everything handheld for the commercial.
I think almost everything actually.
If not, yeah, everything.
Outside of the interviews, but we didn't even really use footage outside of the little intro striped light sequence. I think most of the actual
ever
narrative
made.
pieces were
And now,
all handheld.
In 2022, 20 years later, since they stopped producing the Leica M6,
So at that point, we had just a very specific time where he sat down and opened it for the first time. So we got the footage of him actually unboxing it the first time and his real reaction and just the feeling of like taking it out and it's real, and then hero shot in the hotel room.
I still can't believe the red table.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
pretty
it
great.
was perfect.
It worked.
they've brought it back. The Leica M6 is back. I think what gets me so excited about it is that in an increasingly digital world,
Back to C200 footage in New York.
visual world, analog truly does.
This shot specifically I loved. We were right off of Broadway in Nashville, and this huge LED advertisement was lighting up his face. I saw it hit his face, and I made him stop and come back and look up at it, and it just alternated those colors on his face. I just thought that was really cool.
Slow us down as artists, as
Back in
humans.
St. Augustine.
We crave intentionality. We crave the tactile, physical nature of just how fragile life is.
And it feels really cool that we had the ability to actually take his own film scans from when we were shooting with him. That was another added benefit with, I guess, the amount of time we had and access to his catalog of images to kind of fill gaps too.
Yep.
And that's one of the most beautiful things about film is that these moments are here and gone in a split second. I mean, there's so much beauty from the artist's side, being able to choose out of those 36 frames when to press the shutter. Leica is setting a precedent, re-releasing new film cameras into the world and into the hands of up-and-coming photographers. That's going to change the photography space. More specifically,
That's another sequence there where it's just like the access that we had to Joe for the majority of the year really gave us reference images like that too, where he's talking about the community, where we run into people on the street, people who know him, know his work, being able to get those interactions that he's having with them is so special to add to a film like this.
Like Alex on Streets, that was in Coney, and the two guys that came up to him in Washington Square Park literally came up to him and were like, I love your work. And he was able to interact with them. So it's legitimate, real interaction with people and what he's talking about with community, which is, I don't know, it's just, you can't even plan that.
It's going to change analog photography and how we go about making photographs. I mean, this is just such a huge deal for the film photography community. I think it's going to change.
R5 on that
It's gonna
pickup
make
shot.
Yeah,
this
I'm really
medium
happy that we featured as much of his work as we did.
Yeah.
Also,
that much more
Red dot in the
accessible.
eye.
yeah, that was the craziest thing.
You could see right here the red dot in the viewfinder lighting up his eye right there.
That's the meter.
Which is really cool.
Man, it's such a distinct reflection.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
That much more accessible to so many people. This is my Leica M6, and this is my story. Now go write your story.
That last shot Steven got while I was sick as a dog. Just by himself with Joe. Out on the beach at sunset, St. Augustine.
Yep.
And that swell to the
Nice,
end.
like abrupt ending. Felt like a really poetic way to kind of bluntly cut things off.
And yeah, I think we really leaned on sound design in this one. We wanted it to be really textured with sound design. Joe made that clear with the direction he wanted it to go as well. And I think that is secret sauce in a lot of filmmaking, is just that extra layer and really appealing to that second sense, not just the visual sense, but really like pushing people emotionally on the audio side.
And also just getting good narration to begin with. I mean, audio is always more important than the visual side of things because people will notice if the audio is trash. So yeah, being really, really intentional about that, I think went a long way for us.
No brand that we mentioned in this video is paying us or telling us to make this video. We just wanted to share it because we're excited about having, done this piece, and some encouragement to you if you're in a situation where you feel like you might be overextending yourself or nervous that you're trying a new endeavor, a new creative endeavor, but knowing full well that like if you put yourself out there, this kind of stuff can happen. If you don't put yourself out there, if you don't actually try to make something new or try to step into a new field, you're never going to experience something like this. We just happen to be right place, right time, and all the stars aligned, and now we have this in our portfolio as a piece moving forward, which is insane because we're thinking about starting a commercial company, me, Steven, and Gene ourselves. And we have exciting announcements coming in the new year with that. But also just to kind of speak to some criticism of the thing is that like we actually do stand behind the words Joe said in it about accessibility. We all know Leica isn't the cheapest camera brand. Like we know it's a luxury item, but the words that we stood behind in this thing is that the fact that a major camera brand is re-releasing a film camera that they started making in the 80s and 90s is an insane move for the film photography world and space.
Not just a limited run either, like actual production.
And just starting it again.
In the context of the year that 2022 was for film at large is even more significant, with new film stocks being released from Cinestill and Kodak, and just people getting in the game and putting money on the line and really, really investing back into the world of film photography.
And it might not mean that it's gonna get cheaper. Maybe it will, we don't know. Like other camera brands might release film cameras now that other people are signaling that it's happening again. The Holga came out, or the half frame one.
Yep, the Kodak Ektar half frame.
And yeah, it's just cool to see this stuff coming into, being fed into the film world. I don't think it's gonna become cheap again, but again, that's the investment you're making if you want to invest into this medium and see a return out of it for doing something different and something unique. That's something that's your prerogative and something you have to figure out for yourself. For us, it's been a joy. It's been a blast. It's gotten us really connected to so many other people in the film photography world. Brands and, like film stocks and camera brands and just all sorts of craziness. So again, to that point, like it might be expensive, it might be uncomfortable, but taking the step to do it and try it might lead to something bigger, and you just don't know. So yeah, just play the whole commercial front to back now without our dumb voices on it.
Right here.
Okay.
3, 2, 1.
Bye.
Hey, my name is Joe Greer. I am a film photographer based in Franklin, Tennessee. I'm 33 years old, and I've been shooting on my Leica M6 for about 5 years now. It really took off when I moved to New York City. Having that camera with me every day on the streets, to be able to see those daily, mundane, unlikely moments that pass me every second of every day. I love the energy of the city, the adrenaline, the moments that just zip past me is one of the most inspiring things. It helped sharpen my eye and train me to be the photographer that I am. But I see the world a little differently now. I bought my first Leica M6 in January of 2017, and it's been in my hands almost every day since. I've been able to take it all over the world with me, and I believe that I've made some of my best photographs of my career so far with it. And in that time, this camera has truly become a part of me. The weight of it, the mechanical and intuitive nature of it, the way that the shutter sounds, and even just advancing the film, that simple action has become one of my favorite things. If I lined up every camera that I have and was told, Joe, you can only choose one of these cameras to shoot for the rest of your life, without hesitation, I'm grabbing the Leica M6 every single time, and that will be the camera that I would use for the rest of my life. I think it is the most iconic 35mm film camera ever made. And now, in 2022, 20 years later, since they stopped producing the Leica M6, they've brought it back. The Leica M6 is back. I think what gets me so excited about it is that in an increasingly digital world, high pace, fast pace, visual world, analog truly does slow us down as artists, as humans. We crave intentionality, we crave the tactile, physical nature of just how fragile life is. And that's one of the most beautiful things about film, is that these moments are here and gone in a split second. I mean, there's so much beauty from the artist's side, being able to choose out of those 36 frames when to press the shutter. Leica is setting a precedent, re-releasing new film cameras into the world and into the hands of up-and-coming photographers. That's going to change the photography space. More specifically, it's going to change analog photography and how we go about making photographs. I mean, this is just such a huge deal for the film photography community. I think it's going to change everything. It's going to make this medium of photography, of film photography, that much more accessible to so many people. This is my Leica M6, and this is my story. Now go write your story.
I'm the colorful side of this shot.
You're just monochrome.
Yeah, you're like sad boy over here.
Crazy, wake up.
Okay.